Let's first discuss the difference between parallel positioning and our traditional side stance. In table tennis, the playing style has shifted from a forehand-oriented system to a backhand-oriented system. It's not like 20 years ago, where matches were all about forehand capability. Back then, it was all about forehand rallies and full-table forehand play. Like Min, you'd prepare with a side stance, completely ignoring the backhand. But that era is over. This is no longer the age of competing through forehand strength. Why? Because table tennis techniques have continuously evolved. The ball has changed from the 38mm small ball to the 40mm ball, and now to the 40 plastic ball. The size and material have changed. Therefore, our playing style must also adapt. If you frequently watch international competitions on TV, you'll know. We have now transitioned from a forehand system to a backhand system. It's no longer about who has the better forehand. It's about who has the stronger backhand. It's about whose backhand has a smaller motion, faster speed, and higher quality. Now you even see extreme backhand counter loops and backhand rallies on TV. If we still use a side stance, while the forehand quality can remain high, it becomes very difficult to handle transitions between the two wings. Switching from a forehand loop to a backhand position is very hard to recover from. I used to be a forehand-oriented player too. When I played against good backhand players in Guangdong, I couldn't win at all. Why? Sometimes my forehand loop wasn't even finished, and the ball was already at my backhand side. I simply couldn't cover the backhand in time. Therefore, in this era of the backhand system, if we want to improve, we must learn the parallel stance. Why use a parallel stance? Because it allows for better coverage and transition between the two wings. After I finish a forehand loop, I can slide back to the backhand side easily. If I were in a side stance, I'd need an extra turning motion, making two-wing transitions difficult. With a parallel stance, our method of transitioning is different from before. Based on the parallel stance, we should no longer focus on kicking the legs and turning the waist. Since you are already using an advanced stance, you shouldn't employ the old leg drive and waist turn. What is kicking the legs and turning the waist? This motion is called that. We don't need that now. Let's analyze step by step how to avoid it. We rely on hip control, retracting and thrusting the hips, to replace the leg drive and waist turn. First, what is retracting and thrusting the hips? After adopting the parallel stance, if your first instinct is to drive the legs and turn the waist, you might first think about stepping or twisting the knee. Some even teach twisting the toes. For professional players, these concepts are easy to understand. We immediately grasp twisting the toes to generate power. But for amateur players, terms like driving the legs, retracting the legs, or stepping are often unclear. Let me explain. This is not how you generate power in your legs. Look, this doesn't generate leg power. Neither does this second movement. See, whether you're stepping, twisting your knee, or twisting your toes, these three actions are useless for the legs. They don't store any power in the legs. If you want to use leg drive, waist turn, or weight transfer before hitting, and you try to generate power through these three actions, stepping, twisting the knee, or twisting the toes, you won't store any power. You might feel like you've turned, but that's just a sensation. In reality, no power is stored. Let me teach you a very simple method to feel the power storage in your thighs, which is also part of the modern advanced technique for generating power. Look here, remember this. First, after settling your stance, don't focus on your legs. Just keep your feet firmly on the ground like this. That's all you need. Then, focus on your hips. Remember this term, retract the hips. It means pulling the hips inward, not turning them sideways or pressing them down. Remember, it must be retract the hips. What does that mean? It refers to our hip area, the hip joint. Find the feeling of pulling inward here at the hips. Look, retracting the hips inward. You might see my legs moving, but actually, I'm moving my hips. Once I retract my hips, my thighs naturally store power. See, if I stand here and just retract my hips, look, my leg is firmly braced against the ground. See, there's no power on this side. The power is concentrated here, understand? This is what storing power means. This is how you focus power into your thighs. Only after completing this power storing action can you feel the sensation of generating power from your thighs during the stroke. If you just turn your leg like this, the power isn't stored in your thigh. You must understand the difference. Executing the movement isn't enough. We must understand the essence behind it. Why retract the hips? Because retracting the hips helps store power in the thighs. Simply turning the leg doesn't store power. The thigh remains soft and ineffective. Only by pulling inward can you feel the power naturally concentrating and the thigh tightening. See, the thigh is tense, right? This is how you store power and use your legs to play. Now, regarding retracting the hips, there are a few small details. Remember, retracting is not turning. What is turning? We must avoid the feeling of turning sideways during the stroke. This is turning sideways. This is pulling inward. See the difference? This is sideways. This is inward. During the stroke, retracting the hips also doesn't mean pressing the hips down. Look, this is pressing the hips. This is retracting the hips. This is turning the hips sideways. Can you see the difference between these three actions? Remember clearly. Retracting the hips is retracting, not this. When I retract, my body is storing power inward, and my thigh is firmly braced. This is turning. This is turning sideways, which is incorrect. Simply pressing down is also useless. Just pressing down won't give you the feeling of storing power. See, there's a clear difference. Remember that. This is pressing. This is retracting. This is turning. First, let me explain why we shouldn't turn the hips. Remember, when generating power, we said before that you must focus more on generating force from back to front. You must find the feeling of generating power from the inside out. Our energy should be directed towards the opponent's side of the table. I need to hit the ball to the opponent's side, making them feel the speed and pressure, so that the quality of my shot truly puts pressure on them. In this process, if we want to direct force to the opponent's side, where should the force go? It must be a forward-directed force. Yes, applying more forward force to the opponent is key to applying pressure. If our force is directed sideways, even if you don't understand hip retraction yet, remember this point, never generate power from left to right. What does left to right mean? If you turn sideways like this, you are storing power laterally. Whether you're driving your legs or turning your hips, if you store power sideways, your force becomes a left-to-right rotation. See, if I turn sideways and then try to exert force, most of my power is moving from left to right. So, how much of that force actually goes to the opponent's side? With left to right force, how can you direct more power to the opposite table? Therefore, don't turn sideways. Turning sideways makes your power left to right, resulting in poor quality. But look at my hand, it doesn't move. If you retract your hips inward and then exert force, isn't it more of a back-to-front power generation? That's why we shouldn't turn sideways but rather pull inward. Pulling inward allows you to thrust forward more. Turning sideways mostly creates left-right movement. This is the difference in power generation, more backhand fourth versus side to side. This is a super detailed point everyone must remember. Don't underestimate this small difference between pulling here or there. It can significantly increase the quality of your shots. If this isn't clear, let me give another example. You all know Zhendong, right? His forehand loop, especially on backspin balls, they call it wiping the butt forehand because the motion seems to come from the butt. You've seen his matches on TV, right? He pulls like this. We call this wiping the butt forehand. Think about it. Doesn't wiping the butt indicate that the power is generated more from the inside out? It must be from the inside out, otherwise, how could it be wiping the butt? He definitely generates power from the inside out, which is why it's called that. From the inside out, thrusting forward. Ma Long is the same. Does he loop like this? No, he also uses that compact, powerful forehand motion. This is table tennis at a very detailed level. Yet many amateur players still think it's about turning the waist and swinging the arm sideways. Actually, to generate real power, it must come from the inside out. This is the purpose of retracting the hips, not turning them sideways or pressing them down, but retracting them inward. Your weight should be completely on your hitting leg. This is the key to retracting the hips. So, the first step is retracting the hips, right? Through hip retraction, look, my leg naturally follows. See? After retracting the hips, the second step is thrusting the hips. First, remember, in modern table tennis, when hitting a forehand from a parallel stance, you don't need to worry about this leg at all. Don't pay any attention to this leg. Focus all your attention on this leg and this hip. Your weight should be completely on this single leg, ignore the other side. Why mention this? Because the traditional leg drive and waist turn teaches shifting weight from the right leg to the left leg, then back to the right leg. Why was it taught that way before? Because we used a side stance. Back then, if we only thrust the hips, our body wouldn't come around fully. If I just thrust my hips, my power and body don't transfer completely, the energy dissipates. With the table here, if I don't transfer fully, the power is wasted. So, with a side stance, we needed to shift weight from this leg to that leg to bring the whole body around and direct power to the opposite table. But if we stand parallel and try to shift weight back to this leg, look where I end up. My power isn't going towards the table at all. Sometimes players mistakenly shift like this, thinking they've transferred weight and can use their legs, but it's completely useless. You might feel like you've turned, but only your leg has turned. There's no real power. It's ineffective. Remember, in modern play, don't focus on this leg anymore. Don't shift to this leg. It's unnecessary. As long as you stand parallel, avoid this entirely. Because if you shift here, even if you drive your legs and turn, as long as your weight is on this leg, your body will be overly sideways. Where is your power going? Mostly off the table or into the ground. Now, with a parallel stance, just retract the hips inward on this leg to store power. Then thrust the hips forward during the stroke. Just focus on this. Retract, thrust, retract, thrust. See, as long as you perform this action, your weight transfer is complete. Why? Look, after I retract and thrust, my body is already facing the table. Right? Retract, thrust, my body is already facing the table. In this process, do I need to turn further? No, I'm already here. Why turn more? That would be an unnecessary extra motion. Let's do it again. Retract the hips inward to store power. Focus all weight on this single leg. When exerting force, you don't need to think about driving the legs or anything. You don't have to kick and turn like that. You don't need to forcefully drive or turn, or twist your toes. You don't need driving the legs, turning the legs, or scraping the ground with your toes. Just remember this retract thrust motion. Your thighs will naturally generate power. You can see from my movement, can I generate power like this? Even if I try hard, can this force be applied to the ball? If I twist my toes or my knee, can that force reach the ball? No. Only with the forward-backward power generation we discussed, only with this retract thrust motion, can you feel the power in your legs, and that the force is directed towards the opposite table. Instead of just performing an isolated movement, as long as I retract and thrust my hips, my thighs naturally have power. I don't need to consciously think about thigh power. As long as your thigh is firmly on the ground and you perform the retract thrust, your thigh will naturally exert force. Let's do it again. Before the ball, retract, when exerting force, thrust. Thrust. Okay, that's it. Now, a small detail about thrusting the hips. Remember, thrusting the hips doesn't mean sticking them out far. Don't think that practicing hip thrust will cause hip pain. I've seen videos of people practicing. They thrust out excessively, which is useless and dissipates power. It's not about thrusting out like that. That wastes energy. Remember, where should you thrust to? As long as the hip thrust brings your body around to face forward, you can stop. Don't thrust out excessively. That's ineffective and not what proper hip thrust means. Your power will scatter and be useless. As long as the hip thrust turns your body to face the table, towards your target, you can stop. Retract, thrust. Remember that. Once you are facing your target, you can stop. Furthermore, practicing the retract thrust motion helps you better find the so-called braking or stopping sensation. See my rhythm, retract thrust, retract thrust. Find this rhythm. If you train with this rhythm, you'll also find it easier to achieve the braking or emergency stop feeling that professionals talk about, the sensation of stopping abruptly. You can't find this by hand alone. Remember, if your body is moving side to side with left-right transitions, and you try to find braking with just your hands, you won't find it. Why? Because when your body exerts force, there's no clear relaxation and tension. Trying to achieve relaxed power with just your hands is very difficult. Your body and hands are using different forces, and you want your hands to stop while your legs are still moving. It's impossible. Therefore, the braking action must be considered from the weight transfer stage. How many players practice weight transfer like this? I've seen so many. They practice shadow strokes like 1, 2, 1, 2. How can you find braking like that? Many players in fan groups say they practice shadow strokes for improvement, but they just count 1, 2, 1, 2 endlessly. Have you stopped? In such practice, trying to find hand braking is impossible. Remember the rhythm of hip thrust now. Relax thrust, relax thrust. Now think, if you are hitting the ball while maintaining focus on this single weight position, your body stops, and then your hands can also stop more easily. In this sense, doesn't it help us better find the collective feeling, the braking sensation, the stopping feeling? Remember, braking is never achieved by the hands alone. Trying to stop with just your hands is very difficult. Anyone would struggle. But if you practice retract thrust, you'll see I have a clear retract thrust and a stopping sensation. My hand follows my body's movement to stop together, making it easier to find braking. After stopping, you relax again for the next shot. So, hip thrust helps in two ways. First, to better find thigh power. Second, to better find braking and stopping. At the same time, hip thrust power replaces the old leg drive and waist turn. These are some detailed points about leg and hip power generation. Retract and thrust the hips. If time allows, we'll later discuss how to use hip thrust to form the forehand and backhand framework.